Alright, what's going on? In this video, we're going to explain exactly the things that I do to my bike before every ride. But currently, it is actually 1:30 in the morning. It's like 1:23. So I am not going to be riding. I'm going to bed. But basically, first things first, let's get my bike out here. Let's kind of rest her on this chair right here. That'll work perfect. Okay. Okay. Wow. Yeah. That's how you do that. That's the CSP way. Alright, now, got my bike down here. So, basically, we're going to go to the tool chest over here, open it up, and see what we got. So, we got the pump. We're going to take that. We got the spoke wrench. We're going to take that. We've got the tire pressure gauge. We're going to take that. And yeah, that's all we're going to take out of there. So laid out here, these are the basic tools I use. So I have an assortment here of different Allen key sizes. I have my torque wrench. You don't have to use a torque wrench. You can just use a regular ratchet wrench, but I'll explain why I use a torque wrench in a second. Tire pressure gauge, make sure it goes up enough pressure to, you know, have your tires go up. This one goes up to 60 psi. I'm not going to go more than 60 psi, so that's all I need. Got some alcohol in a spray bottle. Got some actual, whatever it's called. It's like really early in the morning. I can't think right now. And got a spoke wrench. And got a pump. The first thing I do is check my tire pressure. I'll use my pump. Well, I'll flip my bike upside down. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to make this real right now. This is going to be legit. So legit right now. One-handed. Let's go. Yeah. There'll be a how-to on that. Just stay tuned. Now you got the bike upside down. You can work on it. You can spin that. You can see how ridiculously bent your rotors are. You're like, I hate my life. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take this, undo your valve cap, and actually, the first thing I'll do is check the tire pressure just to see where it's at, to see if it even needs air. But whenever you're checking the tire pressure, you always let a little bit of air out. So it's up to you whether you actually want to do this before every ride. I don't check the tire pressure before every ride just because it's kind of annoying. Sometimes I just want to go out and ride. And honestly, the tire pressure doesn't go down that far unless you just put new tubes in your tires. If you just put new tubes in your tires, odds are you probably lost a bunch of air because the tubes are still settling in inside the tire. So, you know, after you pump them up, you know, a few times and go after a few rides, then the PSI is going to be a little bit more consistent. And if you're wondering what tire pressure I used to run 46.5, that's 100% true. But I've been running closer to 50 just because doing bump jumps up stair sets, I've been starting to bottom out on my rims on the actual bottom of the stair set. So I've been running a little bit more PSI because of that. Once I've established that the actual tire pressure is where I want it to be, next thing I do, which is probably one of the most important things that I do when I'm getting my bike ready to go for a ride, is the spokes. I'll tighten the spokes. I won't tighten all the spokes, only, you know, the loose spokes. But it's one thing I failed to do when I first got the bike, and it's super important, especially if it's a brand new bike. Make sure your spokes are tight before every ride. I didn't do this, and my rear rim is now out of true and bent because of it, because half my spokes were like finger loose. I could literally take the spokes out with my fingers. My rim is bent because of it. So don't make the same mistake that I did. Make sure your spokes are tight. So if you don't know how to tighten spokes, you basically just have to use a spoke wrench. Some are shaped like triangles and they have all the different sizes on them. Make sure you use the right size, because if you don't, you know, you could strip out the actual nipples on here, and you don't want to do that because then you can't adjust the spokes anymore. So make sure you do that. And, you know, I'll pretty much just go around, spin the tire around, test each one of the spokes just to make sure that they're tight. Usually the front wheel won't really get that loose. It's usually the rear wheel where I find that they get looser. It might just be because the rear wheel is where I'm having issues, where it'll get looser more often. But the rear wheel seems to be the problem for me for loose spokes. So make sure they're tight and make sure they're all evenly tight. Next up is the axles. Now on my bike, I actually have bolt-through axles. So if, you know, you look on here, this side is actually the side of the wedge, and then the other side is the actual bolt-through portion of it. So the whole axle, you know, slides in there, and then when you unthread this side, you can actually pull it out. So the wedge actually just keeps it from backing out. Now, on most of the other inspired bikes and other Child's bikes, you'll just have like a bolt that will, you know, thread into the hub and clamp onto the forks or clamp onto the frame. So basically one thing you got to be careful about is over tightening that stuff, because usually the stuff on these bikes is aluminum, and I made the mistake on my old bike of tightening those bolts too much, and the bolts started pulling their way through, like the actual washers that, you know, hold the bolts and keep them from pulling through the forks or through the frame and towards the hub. On my old bike, I never did any sort of checking how much tension I was putting on the bolts, because I didn't have a torque wrench back when I was using my other bike. But with this bike, I had acquired a torque wrench, and basically I make sure that the hubs are set to torque specs, just because this bike was super expensive and it was really important to me to make sure that I got it right. And in the manual it actually tells you, you know, for this bike exactly what the torque specs are, so why not do it? Pretty much the last thing that I'll do on my bike before I go out and ride is check how tight my pedals are. So basically with the Inspired pedals, they're threaded in from the inside, so you would actually use an Allen key on the inside of them to tighten them. I'll, you know, use one of these attached to my torque wrench. But one thing that I am going to mention that I know is really important for these bikes is to put anti-seize on the threads. Before you thread it in, you want to put some anti-seize like on your finger and basically just rub it onto the threads, because if you don't do that, since usually the cranks are aluminum and the threads on the axle of the pedal are made of steel, it'll actually pretty much seize together and become one piece and strip out and not work correctly if it's over tightened, or if it comes loose, it's more likely to strip out the inside of your cranks. So basically that's pretty much all I do. You know, we can flip my bike back around to make it official that my bike is technically now ready to go, even though I've done absolutely nothing. I just explained what I do. Seems like a bad idea. Okay, got it. One thing that I really want to make sure that you guys, you know, understand what I mean by making this video, I'm pretty much just explaining what I do before every ride. Every bike's going to be different. Certain things get loose on certain bikes. Certain riding styles are going to make certain things get loose. So these are just the main things that I check that I think are important to make sure that are working correctly on your bike, just because if they aren't working correctly and you don't address them, they can cause your bike to cost you money that you wouldn't have to be paying if you just kept up with the maintenance on the bike. Like, because if you're thinking like, oh man, like my brake rotors would always get loose, like you should mention that. It's like, well, you know, I haven't personally had issues with brake rotors coming loose, although I have had it happen to me a couple times. It's not something that I'll tighten every single ride. I might tighten it and make sure it's tight if I had just installed it, and it's like that for pretty much every part. If you just installed the part on your bike, odds are it's going to get loose faster than any other part on your bike that's been on your bike and been tightened a bunch of times prior, because then usually stuff stays seated longer. I just hope you guys understand what I mean when, you know, I didn't obviously mention everything on the bike that could possibly be tightened, because I don't tighten every single thing on my bike before every ride, because I just want to get out and go ride. Just take this as general guidelines of what I do, and just so you guys can understand, you know, things can happen, like if you don't tighten your pedals, your cranks can strip out and then you have to buy new cranks. So you don't want that to happen. Same thing with the chain, you know, you got to keep an eye on them, make sure that your sprockets aren't wearing into your chain. So I just wanted to make sure you guys understood where I was coming from, you know, by making this video. Alright, so I hope this video was helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. If you have any ideas for videos that I can film or that you want to see, make sure to leave some of those suggestions down in the comments and let me know. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all the latest updates of whenever I upload videos. And as always, remember, have fun and have an awesome day.